Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to edition 2 of the Act and its Impact, the series on the Companies Act 2013. My objective of this series is not to, sort of give you something textual which you may well be able to read, but to give you some insights that I think will be useful for you when you are attempting to read, implement or audit this Act. So in that sense, I think it's pretty much would be useful for both students and members in industry and practice. Part 2 deals about the concept of thresholds. We did touch upon this very briefly in the previous edition, but here goes. What is this concept of thresholds? In the previous Act, a section would apply or not apply depending on whether a company was public, private or listed. This particular Act, the application of a section or otherwise, depends on the category, type, nature of the company, the value parameters associated with that company. Let me give you a small example. Who does rotation apply to? Rotation of auditors applies to all listed companies. It applies to unlisted public companies which have 10 crores or more of paid-up share capital or 50 crores or more of public borrowings from banks, financial institutions or public deposits. Similarly, rotation will apply to private limited companies which have a paid-up share capital of 20 crores or more or 50 crores or more of borrowings from banks, financial institutions or having public deposits. Now you look at this particular illustration. There are many sections in this Act where these thresholds apply. It applies for internal audit, it applies for KMPs, it applies for audit rotation as we saw, it applies for audit limits, it now applies for loans to directors for private limited companies. So, what is this concept of threshold? All you have to do is look at drafting teams who drafted this Act. Assume they had 5 buckets. The first bucket, they said, let's identify the types of companies. So you have public, private, listed, OPC, small, dormant. You have private limited companies with less than 50 members, private limited companies not having intercorporate investments into the share capital itself. So these were the types of companies that they were able to come up with. The second part were the parameters: share capital, net worth, paid-up share capital, turnover, net profits, deposits, loans from banks, financial institutions, loans from other bodies, corporate. All these were the second set of parameters. Then they said, okay, let's put some values to these parameters. What were the values? 50 lakhs, 2 crores, 5 crores, 10 crores, 20 crores, 50 crores, 100 crores, 500 crores, 1000 crores. So for example, a public company with more than 10 crores paid up capital would need a KMP. Companies with a certain share capital, paid up share capital and a certain borrowings or public deposits, as you saw, needed rotation. Now if you thought 3 buckets were complex, there was one more bucket. It's the and the or. So in this particular case, even if one condition was met, they would go into rotation. And then was the last bucket where they decided when. Is it at any point in time during the financial year? Or is it as at the balance sheet date? Or is it the last audited financials? In some cases, the when is not even specified. So ladies and gentlemen, when you actually read this Act, for the applicability or otherwise of a particular section to you as a corporate or to you in the capacity of an auditor for a client, please make sure that you read this section in entirety. This is the concept of threshold-based compliances in this Act. And just for your information, most of these thresholds are not contained in the Act. They are actually contained in the rules. Very few thresholds are actually contained in the Act. It's extremely imperative that you read this Act very carefully along with the various rules, notifications, circulars and removal of difficulty orders that have come along with this Act. And speaking of removal of difficulty orders, my next edition will be on small companies where there is not a small change but a very, very large change which does not sit in the Act but sits into the removal of difficulty orders. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for this patient hearing, part 2, the concept of threshold based compliances. Thank you.